Tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. Malcolm X. Malcolm is not wrong. However, it is hard to prepare for it today when you don't have the correct education, especially on the history of African Americans. For instance, how many of you know who Ruby Bridges is? One. Like most of you, I did not know who she was until 2020. Ruby Bridges was the first Black child to go to an all-white school after segregation ended, where she was met with protests of white parents with signs like "Save Segregation," a side of Black history that many have not heard of. Besides historical figures, so much is left out. While we may know the basics of slavery and why people used slaves, mainly for manual labor, many don't know about luxuries that came from slavery, like sugar. Back in the 19th century, making granulated sugar was a hard and demanding laborious task. This caused a 20-year period in the mid-19th century New Orleans to be what the New York Times referred to as the Walmart for people selling, where enslaved people became common trade for sugar profits. The process for sugar was brutal, with fatigue not being an option and any signs possibly resulting in permanent physical injuries. This was not remembered or taught to most, with the only museum to document the specific horrors of the sugar plantations having opened only 11 years ago. But fully learning about Black history does not just stop with the past. It still affects the way the world is today. A big part of life that has been affected by racism is healthcare. How many of you know that it was a common thing for slave owners and those in support of slavery to justify it by saying there was a difference between how African Americans and white people were? No one. Again, like most of you, I did not know about this until 5-ish years ago. Well, slavery also affects far more than just in healthcare. The main belief spouted was that Black people had large sex organs in small schools, which translated to promiscuity and a lack of intelligence and higher tolerance for heat, as well as immunity to some illness and susceptibility to others. These claims and others led to the father of modern gynecology, J. Marion Sims, who used it as an excuse to perform horrific experiments on Black women. Even in the modern world today, these myths and fallacies still follow healthcare. A prime example of this is the spermometer, which is used to measure pulmonary function and was designed by Samuel Cartwright, a big believer of the myth that Black people have lower lung capacity, which he took into fact when making it, believing that there was roughly a 20% deficit in Black people, which most commercially available spirometers have built in with a race corrector in their system. These fallacies go beyond just technology and its use in healthcare and affects education. London Braun, a Brown University professor of medical science and African studies, reported in her 2014 book that not only is race correction taught to students, but also considered scientific fact and thus common practice. The only way to break down and get rid of myths like these is through education on these matters. These matters, though, are often not talked about. To further see this and examine this, I made a survey with 2 sections pertaining specifically to education on Black history, covering things from where people remember learning the most of what they remember learning about education. Majority of responders stated that they have been educated on Black history here in the Clarkson School District, with 30% learning the most their junior year of high school. The most noted learning any Black history in 6th and 8th grade and sophomore year. Throughout those years, over 90% remember learning of slavery, segregation, and historical Black figures. Out of the 20 respondents, 6 stated that they recall some notable moments from their education on Black history, with many citing them to be MLK Jr., Rosa Parks, or George Floyd, though one did respond with something I had not even heard of. This was how President Lincoln wanted to relocate freed slaves to an island just off the coast of Haiti, a failed plan of 1863 that he advocated for as a fan of ending slavery, but not a fan of integration. This stuck out to me as it was something I had never been taught or remember seeing online. I was fortunate enough to sit down with this student and hear a little bit more about their education on Black history. This student told me that they don't remember a whole lot before 8th grade, but after that has been learning in a classroom setting, describing the level of education being they didn't go too much into depth about it, where they learned just enough to understand, but not much detail, which made me question how they knew about Lincoln's failed plan from 1863. This came from their own independent education, something I relate to as that's where most of my education comes from, which should not be the main form of in-depth Black history. Students first grade through high school should be learning at a level appropriate for their age, with younger kids learning the basics we all know, but as they get older and high school age should be learning more details, like racist medical myths or more uncomfortable things like lynching, with even more in-depth looks or examinations happening in college classes. I am asking you after all of this to talk to your peers and your teachers about what they have learned in class and independently, as well as your local and state education boards, to include more comprehensive Black history, and not just Black history, but that of other minority groups. As Malcolm said, education is the gateway to future, and too many of us don't have the key to it. Demand that that gate is unlocked for everyone.